Now we're going to talk about Act 1, Scene 2 of Macbeth. Hopefully it'll make it a little bit simpler. It'll explain what's going on and help you understand the plot of the scene itself. So even though Act 1, Scene 1 opens with witches discussing their future meeting with Macbeth, we go very quickly in Scene 2 to a camp near Forres, which is an area of Scotland, and there is a war going on. So if you take a look at this map of early Scotland, which would not have been called Scotland, it was the king of Alba, the area. Scotland is technically only this section on the map, even though now we think of Scotland as this whole chunk up here. But this area named Moray is where Macbeth historically was the earl of this area. In terms of the play, they don't really discuss Moray, they just talk about Scotland. But Forres is right here. That's where they are waiting. Inverness in the future is where Macbeth's castle will be. And you'll notice that you've got things like Ross and Caithness. Those are going to be the names of characters because they are considered the noble lords of those areas. So right now there is a battle going on. And as we read through Scene 2, we learn that this battle is between Scotland and a group of Scottish and Irish and Norwegian soldiers. Obviously, the Scots that are fighting against Duncan are rebels in this case, but they're working together. And the battle is taking place over in this area right here because the Norse, the Vikings, their islands and things like that would have been off in this area over here. So that's where they are right now. And the characters that enter, we have King Duncan, his sons, Malcolm and Donalbain. Lennox is one of those royal thanes, one of the kind of noblemen, and then they're with attendants, and they're meeting a bleeding captain. So Duncan starts off by saying, "What bloody man is that? He can report as seemeth by his plight of the revolt, the newest state." Shakespeare doesn't give a lot of stage directions in his plays. He wouldn't have needed to write them down since he was a member of the acting company that performed his plays, so it's not like he wasn't there giving direction. But we are told that the captain is bleeding. So when the captain arrives, we know he has been fighting in the war, and he is one who is going to be good to give us the information that's been happening right here. Now, just to keep track of who everyone is, you have King Duncan, and his sons are Malcolm and Donalbain. Just to keep track of who all of our characters are. And Malcolm introduces this bloody sergeant as a hardy soldier. He fought against my captivity, meaning that Malcolm was taken captive by the rebels, the son of the king, obviously the very important nobleman that he is. And then the captain is going to give a very descriptive take of the battle that is happening. We don't get to see the battle on stage. We don't see a lot of the murders that take place in this play on stage, which was very common for the time to have things happen off stage and then characters come back on stage and talk about them. So rather than showing us Macbeth in battle, the captain comes in and reports as to what is actually happening. And the basic takeaway of it is that there is this gentleman named MacDonald. I know it looks like MacDonald, but it's pronounced MacDonald. And he's the leader of the Irish rebels. He is not Scottish, he is Irish, but he is working with some Scottish people. And in this moment, they talk about how difficult the battle was between MacDonald and Macbeth. Because when we come in here, all's too weak. For brave Macbeth, well, he deserves that name. Disdaining fortune, meaning it was fated, perhaps, that he would die in this battle. And he says, "Not today, fortune." So disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, that's his sword, which smoked with bloody execution like valor's minion, carved out his passage till he faced the slave. So basically, Macbeth is taking his sword and essentially cutting his way through all of these other soldiers on the field, cutting them down, killing them, moving them out of his way until he can get close enough to MacDonald. And then, in my favorite part of this whole scene, which never shook hands nor bade farewell to him. So he doesn't show up and say, "Okay, I'm going to kill you now. Have a nice day." But he unseams him from the nave to the chops and fixed his head upon our battlements. So if you see my little note over here, your nave is your navel, it's your belly button. Your chop is your jaw. So he takes his sword, he shoves it into MacDonald right around the belly button area, and then literally just slices him upward, completely up the middle, and then cuts off his head and attaches it to the battlements outside of battle. So not only is Macbeth a great warrior, he's a great warlord, he is fighting for Duncan, he is fighting the rebels, but he is a bloody, bloody soldier as well. He has no issue with stabbing people, with fighting people, with killing people when it comes to battle. So, why does he describe Macbeth as brave? What is the thing that he does that would make Duncan react in such a way? When we thought we were done, the captain comes back and talks about the next part of it. So, even though we thought everything was done, we thought Macbeth had killed MacDonald, the rebels, leader of the Irish faction, is taken out. Uh-oh, what happens here? The king of Norway shows up. He brings more men, a bigger army, more supplies, and he attacks again. And if you think about it, Macbeth and his buddy Banquo, who we'll meet in the next scene, um, they are fighting and fighting and fighting. They are exhausted. And they finish this battle and they think it's going to be over, or at least they're going to have a break. And without any time passing, you've got the Norwegian lord sending more armies in. And Duncan says, dismayed not this our captains, Macbeth and Banquo, meaning weren't they upset when they saw that? Like, weren't they nervous or worried about what would happen? And the captain says back, yes, as sparrows, eagles, or the hare, the lion. If I say sooth, I must report they were as cannons overcharged with double cracks, and so they doubly redoubled strokes upon the foe. Except they meant to bathe in reeking wounds or memorize another Golgotha, I cannot tell, but I am faint. My gashes cry for help, which is a reminder to us that the captain is standing there bleeding, very, very wounded and injured from this battle. And Duncan is saying, no, 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 hold on. We'll get you some help soon, but I need you to tell me what's happening. Um, and basically at this point, he's like, I can't do this anymore. And Duncan says, so well thy words become thee as thy wounds, they smack of honor both. Go get him surgeons. So Duncan is pointing out that not only is it very honorable that he's come and told this story, but in Scotland at this time, the wounds he has on his body are honorable as well. It shows that he has been part of the battle. And that is the most important thing right now, is that you are violent and brutal and ready to fight. Scotland was a very violent country for many, many years. After he leaves, Ross and Angus show up. Remember, those are thanes, they're noblemen, they're lords of different areas in what we now know as Scotland. And Malcolm introduces them. um, they do their sort of normal intros, God save the king, and they say, you know, from whence camest thou, worthy thane? And Ross says, from Fife, great king, where the Norwegian banners flout the sky and fan our people cold. So Fife is in Scotland. Let's see if we can find Fife on a map. Let's see how this one looks. So what he's saying is that even though he is coming from an area of the country that is Scottish, because the Norwegians are there, there are banners and flags flying in the sky. Norway himself, with terrible numbers, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, the Thane of Cawdor, began a dismal conflict till that Bellana's bridegroom, Lapton Proof, confronted him with self-comparisons, point against point, rebellious arm against arm, curbing his lavish spirit, and to conclude, the victory fell on us. So the Thane of Ross, who is from Fife, where the battle was actually taking place, he's come from Fife. He's telling us what has happened, and that now not only do we know that Norway is there, but we know the name of the Scottish traitor. He is known as the Thane of Cawdor. He is a noble person, but he has banded with the Irish and Norwegian armies to try and fight against King Duncan. So Sweno is the Norwegian king. One of the things they do to him, nor would we deign him burial of his men till he dispersed at St. Colm's Inch $10,000 to our general use. So not only have they won this battle, but now that it's over, they are not going to let the enemy armies bury their dead until they receive money, which is another tactic of war. Burying the dead is very important. It's a ritual. It's part of their religious beliefs in this time period and even today. And to deny them that burial until they paid this money is yet another war tactic. And Duncan makes a really important decision here at the very end of the scene. He says, "No more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive our bosom interest. Go pronounce his present death, and with his former title greet Macbeth." And he says, "I'll see it done. What he hath lost, noble Macbeth hath won." So the Thane of Cawdor, for being a rebel, is going to be put to death. And Macbeth, who is the current Thane of Glamis, which is pronounced Glamis, it looks like Glamis, he's going to give him another title. He is also going to receive the title of Thane of Cawdor now that the Thane of Cawdor is going to be put to death for being a traitor. Now, one of the things we need to keep in mind here is while this scene is going on, where are the witches from Act 1, Scene 1? Because what's going to happen in the future with this play is that the witches are going to tell Macbeth some things about his future. And we as audience members need to consider the following options. Are these witches actually able to tell the future, and they're being honest with Macbeth when they say his future to him in the next scene? Can they not tell the future and they're just making things up? Or are they here during this scene and they hear Duncan say they're going to make him Thane of Cawdor? So when they tell Macbeth his future, they actually aren't predicting anything because they've overheard this information. Shakespeare doesn't tell us anything about where the witches are supposed to be during this scene, and you'll see it done in numerous ways. So you have to think about what kind of play you want as a reader and an audience member, because there's not a right or wrong answer here. You might want the witches to not be around during the scene because you would like your play to be about actual fate, that these witches are supernatural, that they can tell the future, that they are sharing this information with Macbeth. Some people prefer to see the witches during this scene, that they are listening in on the conversation and they're using this information to trick Macbeth into thinking that they can tell the future. So before you leave this scene today, you're going to have to make a decision for yourself. Where are your witches during the scene, and why do you want them to be either on stage or not on stage while this is taking place? Now, you might change your mind as we go through the rest of the play, and that's totally fine as well. But for right now, you need to decide if you were going to put this play on, if you were going to produce this play, where would you put your witches during this scene? So keep that in mind as you answer your question for Act 1, Scene 2. Hope that was helpful and gave you some information.